Hi grade 7s, it's time for another English lesson. I hope you're ready. Make sure you've got yourself a notebook and a pen handy to do our exercises as we work our way through today's lesson. This lesson is going to be on punctuating direct speech. And if you haven't yet already, it would be incredibly useful for you to go and watch the video on direct and indirect speech and the differences between those two before you take part in this lesson. So before we get swinging into today's content, just a reminder once again of our email address. It's grade7@worksheetcloud.com. Okay, so let's take a couple of seconds to quickly remind ourselves of the differences between direct and indirect speech before we start looking at direct speech punctuation in more detail. So indirect speech summarizes or paraphrases what has been said. It does not need any special punctuation, so it doesn't need speech marks. And it is also sometimes referred to as reported speech. So if you hear me say reported speech at times during this presentation, you know I am referring to indirect speech. Now, on the other hand, when using direct speech, there are punctuation conventions that have to be followed because we want to separate out what has been said, the exact spoken words, from the rest of the text. And though that punctuation enables us to do that. Okay, and one other thing that we have to know before we get going on today's lesson is what a reporting clause is. So remember, a reporting clause tells us who is speaking or who said what. So here I have an example for you from the Three Billy Goats Gruff story. So, who goes there? Shouted the troll. That grass looks so green and delicious, bleated the smallest Billy Goat Gruff. And here, reporting clause, shouted the troll. And in the second sentence, the reported clause is bleated the smallest Billy Goat's Gruff. Okay, so we have the reporting clause separated from the actual spoken words with our speech marks, and that's important. Now, obviously, in grade 7, you should know that the most important piece of punctuation for direct speech is the speech mark. Okay, but there are many people that argue the different styles and ways of doing speech marks. So let's just go over those two things very quickly now together. In British English, we accept two ways. The first way is to use what we call single inverted commas. So that is here's the example there. So you don't only use one inverted comma at the beginning and one inverted comma at the end. That's totally acceptable. The more traditional way is to have a double inverted comma. Here to start and here to end. Now, when I was at school, those were called your 66 and your 99 because it looks like a 6, 6, and it looks like a 9, 9. But whichever style you choose to use is totally acceptable. And you'll actually see when you read different books that some authors use the single and some authors use the double. Both are entirely fine. However, what is important is that you use one way consistently throughout your writing. You can't jump in the same piece from using single inverted commas to double and then back to single or vice versa. You have to decide on the style you'd like to use and stick with it. Now, what about the punctuation that appears within the speech marks? So, commas, full stops, question marks, and exclamation marks can be used, but they have to be enclosed within the speech marks. They don't go on the outside. So here is an example. That grass looks delicious, said the smallest Billy Goat Gruff. And you can see I have a comma there before I close the speech mark. Hey, goat, shouted the troll. You are not allowed to cross my bridge. So I've got the exclamation mark before I close the speech mark, and I've got a full stop before I close the speech mark. Or this time, here's a question. How can we get to the other side? Asked the biggest goat Gruff. And again, the question mark is within the speech marks. What you don't do is this. Get off my bridge, close speech marks, then put the exclamation mark. Okay, that is not correct. Commas are exceptionally important with direct speech. So commas are used as a tool to separate the direct speech from the rest of the text. And there's a couple of very important rules you need to know. So where direct speech precedes a verb, precedes means to become before, and does not end in a question mark or an exclamation mark, we use a comma. So here's the example. We need to get to the other side. Moaned the goats. So here, it's not a question I'm asking, and it's not something that I want to exclaim loudly or shout or draw attention to, so I use a comma. Those goats are always disturbing my sleep, muttered the troll. And again, we use a comma. Can you see that the speech, the direct speech, precedes a verb? There's the verb muttered, there's the verb moaned. It's neither a question nor an exclamation mark, so I have a comma. Okay, and just remember though, there is always the need for question marks and exclamation marks as well. So here's an example there. So, who goes there? Shouted the troll. I would use a question mark instead of a comma there because I'm asking a question. And remember that it replaces the comma. It's not in addition to. So this would be wrong here. Who goes there? Question mark, comma, then close speech marks. That's wrong. Now, in all of those examples, the ones I've just shown you, I had the reporting clause at the end of the speech. Yes, so, at the end of the direct speech, there's a reporting clause. But what if the reporting clause was to come before the actual word spoken? So, where the direct speech follows a verb, a comma must be used after the verb to indicate that the reporting clause has ended and that the direct speech is about to begin. Okay, so in this context, the direct speech must always begin with a capital letter. Here is an example. The smallest billy goat's gruff said, comma. Then we open up our speech marks, and I have a capital I for I'll. I'll go first, full stop, close speech marks. So you've got the verb said, and I indicate that the reporting clause is ending by popping a comma there. And the same here. The troll shouted, there's my verb, there's my comma. Open my speech marks. Who goes there? Question mark, because it's a question. Close my speech marks. The biggest billy goat gruff shouted, comma, because it comes after the verb. There's the end of that reporting clause. Open speech marks. Oh, no, you won't. And this time I've got an exclamation mark. Close speech marks. And as I just explained on the previous slide, so at the end of the direct speech, remember I must have a piece of punctuation at the inside of the speech marks to show that I have ended what has been said. So here, remember, full stop, then speech mark, question mark, then speech mark, exclamation mark, then speech mark. And then there is always the case, so we've seen where we have the reporting clause at the end, and we've seen now where we have the reporting clause at the beginning. But what about where we have something called split direct speech, where the reporting clause separates the one spoken sentence? So if the direct speech is one sentence broken up by a reporting clause, you need a comma or a question or exclamation mark, obviously depending, to end the first piece of speech, and another comma before the concluding part of the sentence. So before we conclude the reporting clause. So this is what I mean by that. I am light and quiet. So I put my punctuation there. I've closed my speech mark. Said the smallest billy goat gruff. Put a comma because I'm showing I'm ending the reporting clause. And then I open up another speech mark. So I'll go first. Full stop, close speech mark. In this context, we use a lowercase letter to start the second part of the direct speech. So you'll see that this S is a lowercase s, not a capital S, and that's because it's still one sentence. I'm light and quiet, so I'll go first. All I've done is I've popped in, said the smallest billy goat gruff, to separate those two parts of the same spoken sentence. It's one sentence that's been split. If, however, you have a split direct speech, but this time it's two discrete sentences separated by your reporting clause, then you need a comma to end the first piece of speech, or a question or an exclamation mark, remember, and a full stop after your reporting clause. Then your second sentence begins with a capital letter. So let me show you what that looks like. You're right, comma, close speech marks. Agreed the biggest billy goat gruff. Now this time I've got a full stop, see, because that is one sentence. And now I start my next part of speech. Open up my speech marks and I put a capital W for we can't let the troll beat us. Full stop, because it's now a new sentence. It's not one sentence. You're right and we can let the troll beat us are two discrete sentences. And the other very important piece of punctuation convention that you need to know when you are punctuating direct speech is the new speaker, new line rule. So if the direct speech is a text that involves more than one speaker, so there's a dialogue between characters going on, then every time a new speaker speaks, you put a new line into your work. So here we go. We can't let him win. He's just a grumpy old troll, said the smallest billy goat gruff. You're right, agreed the biggest billy goat gruff. The medium-sized billy goat gruff said, so what shall we do? So there are three people speaking there, each of the different billy goats. So every time someone new speaks, I come down and I start a new line. It really helps the reader to follow what's being said. So now that you know all of those things, all of those conventions, the need for speech marks, the punctuation that goes within the speech marks, the reporting clause and the new speaker, new line rule, let's see if we can put it into action. Now I'm going to show you something I was taught when I was, I think, about grade 5. But it has always helped me when punctuating direct speech. So here I have a little boy who has said the words, my leg really hurts. So what I want you to imagine, this is what my teacher taught me, is imagine that the words are sheep. Bear with me, it will make sense soon. Here we go. My leg really hurts. Now, the sheep have to be kept in a pen, otherwise they'll run off and go everywhere. So the pen is my speech marks, and these will help to contain my sheep. If there's no capital letter on the first word, then the sheep can escape from the pen. Now, my teacher used to call that the shepherd. So the capital letter is the shepherd, and he has to be inside the pen with the sheep, otherwise they'll all escape that way. But if I put the capital letter there, then they can stay in. And if there's no punctuation mark after the last word, the sheep can also escape that side of the pen. So we call that your sheepdog. He also needs to be inside the pen with the sheep. Otherwise, they can go out that way. So that would look like this. There we go. Up they pop, and they're now secure in the pen. Now the sheep are safe and they won't escape. They are inside a pen, they're inside my speech marks, with their shepherd at one end, the capital letter, and with their sheepdog at the other, the punctuation mark, to protect them and keep them inside the pen. And then, as I said before, the new speaker, new line rule. So remember that now that you know how to punctuate speech, every time a new person starts speaking, you need to have a new sheep pen on a new line. So here we go. Pen, shepherd, sheepdog. My leg really hurts. And then here I have my reporting clause. Cried the boy loudly. I've added an adverb to help me there, and it gives me an indication as a reader as who has said these words. New speaker, new line. Pen, shepherd, sheepdog. Let's have a look then. Soothed mum. There's my reporting clause. There's my verb see, so I know that it's the reporting clause. And I know that those sheep are safe. Now, we've covered a lot about the conventions that are needed when writing direct speech today, and it's very hard to remember them all at once. So what I've created for you is a summary table here that you could copy down into your notebook to help you when you are doing this for yourself in your own writing. So let's go through it quickly. In all indirect speech, there is no extra special punctuation that is needed. But in all direct speech, the spoken words must be enclosed in speech marks. Direct speech that comes before a verb, so that's before the reporting clause, we use a comma after the direct speech inside the speech marks, and then the verb begins with a lowercase. Now remember, I've kept it simple on this table by just saying comma, but if it is a question, then it would obviously need a question mark. And if it's someone shouting or exclaiming something, it would need an exclamation mark. Okay, direct speech that comes after the verb. So this time we have the reporting clause before the direct speech. We use a comma after the verb, which is outside the speech marks. Then we have the direct speech beginning with the speech marks and a capital letter. Remember, that's important, that's your shepherd. If it is split direct speech, but one sentence, we use a comma, exclamation or a question mark, inside the speech marks to conclude the first part of speech. A verb starts with a lowercase letter, followed by a comma, so that's how we know that we've ended the reporting clause with the comma. And then the direct speech resumes with speech marks and a lowercase letter, okay? And that's important because then remember, although you might say, but we don't have our shepherd, it's one speech that has been split. So we don't need a shepherd always in that instance. But if it is a split direct speech with two sentences, we use a comma, exclamation or question mark inside the speech marks to conclude the first part. Then we have a verb which again starts with a lowercase letter. Now we're following it with a full stop to say that we've ended that one sentence, and the direct speech resumes with speech marks and a capital letter. Okay, so now let's have and end our lesson with a 2-minute challenge. So consider the following. The troll said, "Get off my bridge," and the goat said, "No." Technically, this example is correct. However, it is rather clumsy. Think about 2 ways that this example could be improved and give yourselves 2 minutes in which to do that. And if you wish to, you can rewind the video back quickly and freeze it on that summary table to see if that helps you do that. So 2 minutes. Start whenever you're ready. Okay, so let's see how you did. So again, we have the sentence. A troll said, "Get off my bridge," and the goat said, "No." So how are we going to improve that to make it better, more grammatically correct, based on what we have learnt? Okay, so the first rule that I think is most important here is the new speaker, new line rule. So now I've split that one sentence into 2. The troll said, "Get off my bridge," and because the "no" is said by a different character, I started on a new line. "No," said the goat. I can check that the punctuation is still correct, so I have all spoken words within speech marks, both "no" of the goat and the "get off my bridge" by the troll. I have a reporting clause here to begin, and there's a comma after the verb. And here I have the reporting clause at the end. The said is still a small letter, and I finish with a full stop. So I feel like I am good to go. I'm happy there. But what is another way, a different way I could have improved that sentence to make it less clumsy? Well, I could have turned it into reported speech. Remember, reported speech is the other name for indirect speech, instead of having it as direct speech. The troll told the goat to get off his bridge, but the goat refused. I've changed some of the words because I'm paraphrasing now and reporting what had happened. So it is now in the past tense as well. Okay, I hope that helped. So see if you can remember and practice those rules for punctuating direct speech. And as I said, make sure you have watched the other lesson on direct and indirect speech that accompanies this lesson. Have a lovely day, further grade 7s, and don't forget to do the work that has been assigned to you below this video. Okay, bye.